Welcome to another session of Lifting Your Spirit, a monthly broadcast in which we interview people about their spiritual lives and how they support others in lifting their spirit. I'm Joel Grossman, Interfaith Minister, Director of Spiritual Services with Constellation Hospice here in Newburyport, and I offer spiritual direction and counseling on a donation basis virtually.
And I'm Ted Jones. I'm a meditation teacher at North Shore Insight Meditation Community.
Our show is based on the following four principles. 1, everyone is spiritual, regardless of if we're conscious and active in our spiritual lives or not, we still have a spirit.
And second, that there are many ways to lift your spirit, not only through formal religious practices, but also through nature, art, human relationships, service to others, just to name a few.
Third, each person's spiritual path is unique and may change in small or large ways over time.
And fourth, that it's important to respect your own spiritual journey, trusting that one step leads to the next, and also to respect other people's unique spiritual journeys, even though they may be much different than your own. We're not here to convince you of the benefits of any particular method or tradition, but rather just to offer food for thought. I'm very pleased to have as our guest today my colleague at the North Shore Insight Meditation Community, Adam Groff. Adam began practicing Buddhist meditation in 2009 at the Insight Meditation Center of Newburyport under the guidance of guiding teacher Matthew Daniell. From 2010 to 2015, he helped lead Dharma Punx Boston, a weekly peer-led meditation community. In 2014, he completed a year-long meditation facilitator training program with Against the Stream Meditation Society, led by Noah Levine. He then helped start a Boston chapter of Against the Stream. Since 2023, he has been the manager of North Shore Insight Meditation Community, and he teaches meditation both at North Shore Insight and the Wenham Meditation Center. Following a 17-year career in content editing at EBSCO Information Services in Ipswich, Massachusetts, Adam is now a graduate student at Salem State University, training to be a mental health counselor. Adam, it's great to have you with us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So we always start by just inviting you to talk about your own spiritual journey, back from as far as you can remember, right up to the present day.
Yeah. Well, that's a very open question.
Yes.
How long do you have? No, it's not. There's not too much. I guess there's. Well, so I grew up in Pennsylvania.
In what part? Pennsylvania is a big place.
It is Bucks County, north of Philadelphia.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, so southeastern Pennsylvania.
Been there, yes.
Yeah, no, it is worth noting because it is a big state, and I always tell people I've never been to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh is as far from where I grew up as we are now.
Really?
So,
Yes,
yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, so Pennsylvania Dutch is actually my cultural background, which is Pennsylvania German. Simple farming folk. But anyway, I grew up in a liberal family. I went to United Church of Christ growing up, liberal Protestant denomination. But basically a family of free thinkers, I guess I would describe it, and you know, like a lot of kids, I was like pretty into church and the concept of God and Christianity. I mean, it made, it resonated with me as a child. And then as I grew older and became an adolescent and started learning more things about the world, and I started questioning things, the way young people do, my church memberships sort of stopped making sense to me. In particular, I just entered that young person's period of exploration, and I guess it's sort of interesting. Instead of sort of just like drifting away the way young people do, like when I was a member of the church, and when I figured out that like I didn't feel like I believed in the way that one ought to believe to be part of a church, I made an appointment with the pastor and just talked to him about it and said that I didn't think I ought to be a member of the church anymore, and he was a great guy, and he was very understanding and always supportive, and he just respected that and said, okay, I'll, we're always here for you, and he took me off the church membership. So then I went to college and all that. I mean,
so
please.
You stopped going at that point. I mean, I think that's an extraordinary story. I mean, having been a Catholic who dropped out, when I was in college, the idea of even any kind of termination process with a church or anyone else. I mean, it's. I think that most people just walk away, and so there's a certain sense of your character being reflected in that you went and talked to the pastor about it.
But also that it being the type of church where I felt like I could do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As opposed to a church where I would be like, they would be like, well, you're clearly going down the wrong path. He didn't say that.
Yeah.
Which I think in a lot of churches they probably would.
Speaks very well for him too.
Yeah, he was a great guy. Yeah, Fred Schwert. He was because in successive years later on in my life, I reached out to him a couple of other times when I felt like I needed counsel or whatever. Not a lot, but just a couple. Well, whatever. Without my first marriage, I'm in my second marriage. My first marriage it came to an end at a certain point, and I remember when I was struggling with that, I called him anyway. I think it speaks well of him and that church.
Yes.
But yeah.
So now you're churchless.
Yeah.
In late adolescence.
That was relatively early. I must have been 16 or something like that. But just because it's like somewhat relevant to what comes later, also to mention that in my adolescent years in high school, I felt like kind of an outsider, like like I didn't fit in or whatever, and I was drawn to punk culture. And so I got into punk rock, and I cut my hair in crazy ways and started listening to that type of music, and that was an important sort of identity phase for me. I liked a few things about it. It was like a socially critical stance. Like obviously, there's certain things and there's certain sort of obvious inequities in society that like most people aren't talking about, and so I really appreciated that social critical stance and the kind of like not following along with what everybody else is doing. So I did that for a few years. Well, that was just part of my identity for a number of years, and then I went to college, and it's a bit of a strange story actually. I went to college. Went to a few colleges. I went to college for a year after high school. Wasn't really that into it, so I dropped out. Traveled around a bit. Ended up out in Seattle for a couple of years, where a couple of my brothers live. And at some point in all this, I went through a big ideological swing. Like I got a certain point down the path, and this like society is wrong and government is bad, and like church is bad, and everything is wrong. And I got to a certain point down that path, and I sort of had this realization that again, which I think is unusual, I had this realization that I actually didn't know what I was talking about. Really, like honestly, I was like, it was this weird kind of moment where I was actually like, I'm actually kind of full of shit in a lot of ways. Like I'm ranting and raving about things. You know, I don't really understand how society works or how it got to be that way, or like why we might need a military. You know, and it was a really profound. Didn't happen overnight. It was like over the course of a year or so, and I started reading different things, and I recanted my social critical stance, and ultimately at the end of it, I enlisted in the military.
Wow, that's a pretty big swing.
Yeah, I was literally like, you know, I should like learn about these things before I criticize them. So I joined the Army. It was actually the Army Reserve, Army National Guard, but I went to basic training and skill training, and I like cut my hair, and I stopped wearing crazy clothes, and I tried to like be like a normal, you know, person or whatever. But it was more than that, actually. So I was in Seattle for a couple of years, and ultimately I ended up transferring to the Citadel.
Oh, okay.
Which at the time was an all-male military school in Charleston, South Carolina, which is just an insane thing to do. It was an extremely conservative institution. A friend of mine, a guy I was friends with in high school, went there, and I knew that, you know, he had graduated by then because I took a circuitous route in college. But I transferred into the Citadel, and I graduated from there in 3 years. And you know, so I went from being this punk rock kid with a mohawk, going to shows and slam dancing and stuff like that, to 3 years later, I'm going to a military school in a uniform, marching around and shooting guns and stuff.
Yeah.
Really weird.
Now, your graduation, did that make you an officer in the Army? Or?
It didn't. That's not, the Citadel is not, at the Citadel it's, well, they have ROTC for all of the branches, like Air Force, Army, and Navy, and Marines, and it's strongly encouraged, but you don't have to. Everybody takes ROTC classes, actually, but you don't have to contract with any of the branches if you don't want to. I think something like a third of cadets do that.
Okay.
But and I actually thought that I did want to do that. I did think I wanted to become an Army officer, but like most of the paths I've attempted in life, like I got a certain way down the path, and I was like, this is the story. I get a certain way down the path, like being like, I'm going to commit to this thing, and this is going to be who I am. And then I get a certain way down the path, and I'm like, actually, I don't, you know, it doesn't, you know, this is not the answer.
Yes.
This is not the be-all, end-all, you know, and it doesn't fit me somehow or other. You know what I mean? So, so I decided against going into the Army as an officer after the Citadel, and I just graduated in 1995 and went back to Pennsylvania. I had a degree in history, and I went back home to Pennsylvania. Liked history, thought I wanted to keep studying history, and I eventually entered the master's program in history at UMass Amherst, which is what brought me to Massachusetts. So, and in the history program at UMass, I met my first wife, Bethany Groff, who is the executive director of the Old Newbury Historical Society. Has a local figure of some note.
So she stuck with history.
Absolutely, yeah, she did. Yeah. She's done great. But yeah, and her family is from West Newbury. So after grad school, we relocated. We had a young child, and we relocated here to be close to her parents. And so what happened then? So then I just sort of like moderated. So then I was just kind of like a, you know, average, you know, whatever, middle class dad. I actually got a job as a newspaper reporter at that time. Actually, we lived in Haverhill initially when we moved back here. But my dad was a journalist, so I got a job as a newspaper reporter. With
who?
let's see, a few places. Like the first place I worked was the Andover Townsman, weekly paper in Andover, and then I worked at the Haverhill Gazette for a while. This is all under the umbrella of the Lawrence Eagle Tribune, you know, and then I worked at the Hampton Union, and then I got a job as a correspondent with the New Hampshire Union Leader. Yeah, so it was a total of about 6 years. I was a newspaper reporter on September 11th, actually, in Andover, which was like not an easy time to be in that profession. There were people in Andover who were killed on 9/11. The town clerk's son was in one of the Twin Towers, and I had to go knock on her door and get a comment, you know, which is like,
Ooh,
yeah,
brutal.
you know, yeah. So again, and that it was like the same thing. I was like, I don't know if this is going to be my ultimate, seriously, because you have to be. The other thing you have to sometimes do is try to get comments from people that don't want to comment, like public officials, and you have to be like kind of aggressive and dogged, I guess I would say, and that's also not particularly my nature, you know. So. It was a really good experience, but I did that for about 6 years, and then I got a job at EBSCO Information Services in Ipswich, which is a rather large company that a lot of people will be familiar with because there's about 2,000 odd people that work there, and I was there for many years, and I was a content editor. I was in a small part of the company that generates original content. So I was working with freelance writers and editing and fact checking their work. So it was aligned with my interests and my background, writing and editing. It's something I'm good at. But again, I wasn't passionate about the job, but it was like a good, stable job, you know, and I had like, you know, and 401k and health insurance and all that stuff. And I had a couple little kids, you know. And so somewhere in there, I got interested. I got curious about Buddhism. Somewhere in there, I got interested in Buddhism.
How did that show up?
I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. Thinking back on it. I mean, I guess it's in the ether a little bit. It's out there. The other thing that was happening, funny enough, is my son was a little kid. He was like 8 or 9, and part of the story I always tell is that the first time my son ever heard like aggressive music, like heavy metal music, he was like really drawn to it, you know, and you know, and I was a little bit like, oh no, my son's gonna become a metalhead, you know. And then I was a little bit like, you know, come here, Junior, and, you know, and I started pulling out my old punk rock records. You know, I was like, this is, you like aggressive music, this is better, you know. And I started playing it, and it was you know, and I was, and then he kind of liked it or whatever, but I myself was like, this is really good, you know. And I kind of got, I was reawakened to it a little bit, just nostalgic, and so like that happened, and then I started paying attention a little bit more, and it was sort of like out there still, but like there's the internet, and so there was bands on the internet, and it was like it was just very interesting because it's like one of those, it's a subculture, right? So it's one of those things where if you're not aware of the subculture and you're not paying attention to it, it doesn't exist. Like you don't see it, you know. But then if you look for it, it's all of a sudden it's there. So like I actually started going to shows again and stuff like that. You know, I was like 40 or something. You know, which is a thing now. There's lots of people doing that. But so then the other.
Buddhism.
Right. Buddhism, and then the reason it's relevant is I started wondering, is there any, so like weird, like sort of like punk history, like in the 90s there was this odd phenomenon in punk rock where there was a couple of notable bands whose members became Hare Krishnas.
Huh.
So it was like in New York City there was like a couple of notable, you know, there was a band called Shelter and a couple others where it's like, so there was like this weird spiritual intersection in some
Yeah.
corner of the punk scene or whatever, you know, Krishna core, they called it for a while. And I was I started getting interested in Buddhism, and I rekindled an interest in punk rock, and I was like, well, there was this punk Krishna thing. I wonder if there's any intersections between Buddhism and punk rock. And I literally went on the internet and Googled Buddhism punk rock. I don't know why that's such a weird thing to do. I don't know why I did that, but I did that. And the thing that came up was Dharma Punx.
Yeah.
Oh, I was wondering how that
Yeah.
showed up.
Yeah, Dharma Punx, which like not a lot of people are going to know who that is. So there was this guy in California by the name of Noah Levine, and he was a punk rock guy and a miscreant, and did lots of graffiti art and did a lot of drugs, and his dad. More people will know his dad.
Yeah.
Did you want to?
Well, no, his dad,
Yeah.
Stephen Levine,
Yeah.
was a wonderful spiritual teacher
Yeah.
over many years. Certainly a profound influence on my life,
Yeah.
and that I.
Me too.
And I.
Is that right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people watching this will
Yeah.
sort of resonate with that. And I do remember. I can't remember whether it was his account or his son Noah's account of Noah being in jail.
Yes.
And Stephen just saying, well, you have a choice. You can either get it
Yeah.
together and there is a path out of here.
Yeah.
in terms of meditation and taking things seriously, or you're just going to
Yeah.
throw your life away. And that there was a
There was,
moment
it was literally a jailhouse conversion.
Yeah, right. Yes.
Yeah, that's in his autobiography. Yeah, like his dad was this spiritual teacher, and he was like, the heck with you, Dad. And he became a drug addict and kind of a petty criminal. And
Interestingly,
Yeah.
following in his dad's footsteps, that Stephen Levine had been an addict.
Oh, is that
in a
right?
young part of his
Oh,
life
I don't know
as
that I
well.
knew that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so basically, so he hit rock bottom is what it is, and he ended up in the jail, and he had a phone call, and like you do when so he
Yeah.
called his dad. And he tells in his autobiography, he called his dad, and his dad gave him basic meditation instructions over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Just sit quietly and watch your breath in your jail cell. And that was like, he turned his life around basically. Like, he got out, and he was still a pretty young guy. This was probably the early 2000s, and yeah, he got out, and it's California, right? So he got really, he started going to Spirit Rock Meditation Center, which is the big insight meditation, Jack Kornfield's outfit out there, and he got really serious about the path, and he was authorized to teach. And I think he went through the Spirit Rock teacher training program. Jack Kornfield authorized him to teach Buddhism, the first thing he started was these little peer-led meditation groups, and he called it Dharma Punx, and it's definitely a callback to Jack Kerouac's Dharma Bums, right?
Yes.
So that was like the
Yeah.
hippies that got into spirituality. So he's like, well, we're the punk rockers getting into spirituality. So it's Dharma Punx, not Dharma Bums.
Yeah.
So this was like, and then the Dharma Punx was like this informal network of like peer-led meditation groups spread all over the country. Again, I ended up Googling it and finding it, and I was like, I wonder if there's one of these in Boston. And then I Googled Dharma Punx Boston, and sure enough, there was a Dharma Punx meeting in the group in Boston that met every week or every other week. At the time I started in Arlington, and I was definitely in a period of searching, because again, my marriage was going downhill, and so things weren't, so I was in that period of, I always say, this, like a lot of people, I came to Buddhism through suffering. The Buddha teaches suffering and the end of suffering, like how and why do we suffer and how do we make it stop. It's not just Buddhism, but any people come to spirituality often when they're at a difficult time in their life.
Yes.
So I started trying this. The other thing is I went to IMCN. I went because there had been Insight Meditation Center of Newburyport, which I had seen, because again, my in-laws lived in West Newbury, and like to drive over there, sometimes I would drive past this meditation center, and I was always like, what is that? You know, like I was always really curious, and then like, and I started going there, you know, and I thought Matthew was a really engaging teacher, and I was like, this is pretty cool, you know, and then there was then I started going to the and then I
developing your own practice.
Yeah.
Fairly regular at that point. Were you meditating every day, for instance, or
not in the beginning. I don't. Yeah, it's kind of hard. I had a job and I had little kids, and I didn't make it a daily practice initially. Like they had classes at IMCM, like weekly classes, and I would go to I met you there, of course.
Yeah.
You know. And then they had Saturday programs. I probably started going to those. But I went to I went to check out the Dharma Punx group in Boston. And at that time, they were meeting in Arlington, actually, and that was sort of enlivening for me as well, because I walked through the door, and the people sitting in the circle were like my age and like all full of tattoos and like but just like, again, like it was like a bunch of like middle-aged punk rockers like trying to find you know, through their wild years, many of them in recovery. That's the other thing. Noah is in recovery, and he always attracted a lot of people in recovery from drugs and alcohol. And so it was just like, we're going to talk about this more, but I give Noah Levine a tremendous amount of credit for attracting an entire cohort of people to Buddhism and meditation who never would have paid it any mind if it had been anyone other than him presenting it. But here's this big guy with tattoos and a shaved head talking about the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, and how you can alleviate your suffering.
One of the things that I remember, and I think it was on an interview or some show where he was talking, and that he was referencing how meditation teachers often speak in soft kind of relaxing tones, and he was basically ridiculing that. And as someone who has had compliments to me of, oh, your voice is so soothing.
Right.
It's like,
right.
So he had a hard edge to his teaching.
Yeah, he would use off-color language. You know, he would drop f-bombs at the front of the room while teaching Dharma.
Yeah.
You know, but that was so engaging to a certain cohort of people.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a young person who is of a rebellious frame of mind, and again, young misfit, whatever, tattoos. You're not going to go into a room full of elderly middle-class white people, you know, talking in soft tones. You know, that's like the last place in the world you want to be. You know, like, this is terrible. You know, but he made it relatable. You know.
Let me just add that in the early days, us white middle-class people, that was our rebellious action.
Right.
Into this Eastern spiritual stuff.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, no, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So you were going to Dharma Punx.
Yep.
And then at a certain point, Against the Stream Meditation Society pops up, and also founded by Noah.
So I guess what happened with Noah was he had all these little, he just started this thing with people like meditating or whatever, and I guess he was like how can we formalize this, or how can we make it more of a, so he founded the nonprofit Against the Stream Buddhist Meditation Society. And he created a formal organization to you know, and of course the name comes. There's a place in the Buddha's teachings where he says, you know, the path towards liberation goes against the stream. It goes against the stream of greed, hatred, and delusion. And he picked that out, and that's where it's a great name.
Yeah, it is a great name.
You know, but again, it retains that sort of rebellious pushing
Yes,
against.
exactly.
You know, so it's interesting. But
And how was that structured? With like centers around the country?
yeah, so he founded it in L.A. He founded it in L.A. in 2007 or 8 or something like that. I think I could be wrong about that, but there was a center in L.A. and then he formed a center in San Francisco under a fellow, I think. It's under Vinnie Ferraro now, or eventually it was under Vinnie Ferraro. I don't know, it was original, but anyway, yes, it started to spread. So then there was an Against the Stream Nashville, and then there's a center in New York City. New York City is an odd one. They always retain the Dharma Punx name. There's a teacher by the name of Josh Korda who teaches it. It's called Dharma Punx New York Dharma Punx, but it's a larger group. And then I think those are most of them. And so I got very interested in all this. And in 2011, and so he started teaching retreats through Against the Stream at places like Joshua Tree and other places in California. And then in 2011, he did the first East Coast Against the Stream retreat. And I was like into it by then. And I was
Where was that held?
Initially, it was at a tiny little place in western Massachusetts called Earth Dance.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, real little rural area. What the heck is it? Plainfield, I think, is the name of the town. It's like a little. It's probably, I think it's even west of Amherst or whatever. But it's just, it was mainly a dance. It was actually a little dance studio, but they had a big dance hall that was like round, and it was great for a meditation hall. Mm-hmm. And they had like a dormitory type building, but you know, like at Dharma Punx, they were like, oh, you know, Noah's teaching an East Coast Against the Stream retreat, you know, and I was like, I definitely want to go to that. That's amazing. I had never sat a retreat before.
Oh.
You know, and by this time I was going to Boston Dharma Punx regularly, and it was like one guy that was running it, and it was like a pain for him when he had to like be away, and he was always trying to get people to fill in for him when he had to be away, and I was like, I can ring the bell to start the meditation and like read something out of a book afterwards for a discussion, and he's like, that's great. You're in. You know what I mean? Yeah, seriously. And so that's what because I wanted to be involved, and it was like very straightforward. I didn't have to guide the meditation. I was like, we're gonna have a 20-minute period of meditation. I'd like ring the bell, and we would sit, and then I'd get like, you know, a book by Pema Chodron or something like that, and I would read a paragraph out of like Things Fall Apart, and we'd have a conversation, and it went well. I mean, I guess you could say that's how I sort of got into like, you know, any type of leadership situation. Yeah, and then I went on a 5-day retreat with Against Stream, which was amazing because I'd never done anything like that before. I didn't know what noble silence was. You know, conventionally, Buddhist meditation retreats are held in noble silence, which is if it's a 7-day retreat, you know, it's called noble silence. You don't talk for 7 days.
Yeah.
You know, you're doing sitting and walking meditation, and you're eating your meals, and you're not. A couple points you might have a one-on-one interview with the teacher to see how things are going, and you're talking then, but the rest of the time you're all sitting together, you're eating together, you're passing each other in the hallways, and nobody is talking or looking at each other, and it's to try to really reduce the amount of mental noise, so you can really drop into, you know, a state of mindfulness or whatever. But I just remember the first time I went on retreat, I didn't fully understand what noble silence entailed, you know, and I was like, oh yeah, it's a meditation retreat, we're going to meditate, we're going to be in silence, you know, but they were like, no, you're going to be in silence the entire time you're here. And I was like, wow. You know, as a guy who likes to talk, you know, but it was profound. I thought it was profound, and you know, and so I was like, I don't know, you know, and then again, at the same time as all this, my marriage is ending. So 2010, 2011, I moved out and got an apartment, and it was, and again, and that, I was like really at this like, divorce is absolutely devastating.
Yes.
We had 2 young kids. My kids were 8 and 12, and that's the most devastating. And it was not, we had the best divorce. We had the best divorce you could have. It was we both went to one lawyer. It was mediated. It was as agreeable as it could be, and it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah.
I would cry myself to sleep at night, especially because of these kids. What did they do to deserve this? Absolutely nothing. It's really a heart-wrenching experience. And that's the sort of thing that will make you get serious about your spiritual practice.
Yeah.
I remember I had the specific thought. I moved out and I was like, well, I could do a couple different things here. I could start drinking, which is something a lot of people do in that situation.
Yes.
And it's not like I don't drink, and it's not like it wouldn't have been an option. But I was like, I could start meditating more, or like follow this spiritual path that talks about suffering a lot.
Yeah.
I remember talking to you about it actually at IMCN. I remember having a conversation with you about it because. Are you on your second marriage?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So
Yeah.
we probably talked about it because my end of my first marriage was a very extraordinarily painful
Yeah.
period for me.
It's awful.
And probably the worst thing that's happened to me.
Yeah, but I remember standing outside IMCN with you talking about this, and you were saying something about like, just like you had this direct experience of impermanence.
Yes.
Which is another fundamental teaching of the Buddha. And at that time, I was still struggling a lot. It didn't actually land with me that much I remember at that time being like, oh, well, great. It wasn't particularly,
Yes.
you hear so many different things from different people, and some things land and some things don't. It's like all this like, but now I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
It's like that's where impermanence really shows up, where it's really an intense situation.
Yeah.
I mean, that we can look at all kinds of small impermanences, but when it's really hitting you in the heart, it's when we really start to understand it.
Yeah, and the truth is that it's always there. And it's, everything, I was going to say everything can end. It's not everything can end. Everything will end.
Yes.
And it's like our entire life, this is the teaching. It's like our entire lives are oriented around ignoring or running away from the fact that everything will end. And that's... Then when things end, you're super vulnerable and blindsided. It's like not, it's a problem. And also, if we had been thinking about it, and if we had understood that these things are going to, we might have conducted ourselves differently, in maybe a little more helpful way.
Yeah. Well, and that is the spiritual path, really. To sort of live from that place of realizing that everything is impermanent.
Absolutely.
And how we bring that into each moment.
Totally. Yes.
It also, on the other hand, means that everything the next moment is new.
Yeah, right.
You can appreciate.
Right.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. It's a sword that cuts both ways. If everything is great, you need to understand that that's going to end. And if everything is terrible, you need to understand that that's going to end. Or not that it's going to end, but it's going to change.
Change, yes.
But of course, what everybody does is be like, what we want to do is get it so that everything is great, and then make sure it never changes. It's just,
fool's errand.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
Okay, so you went to the retreat.
Yeah.
And then things went from there. You got
Yeah, yeah.
involved in starting a center in.
Yeah. And then I started going to that retreat every year. The Against the Stream East Coast retreat happened every year. It's like 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15. And Noah has started his own teacher training program through Against the Stream, and he trained and empowered a lot of teachers. Josh Corder being one of them. And he would bring,
you, right?
I went through the facilitator training. I'm a
okay.
meditation facilitator, which was like a 1-year program that just basically it's like Buddhism 101, and it teaches you to lead meditation groups.
Yes.
But I'm not an empowered Dharma teacher.
Right. Okay.
Which is more like a
Yes.
4-year program and is a lot more intense and requires a greater depth of practice and spiritual understanding. But he trained a bunch of teachers, and he would when he would teach his retreats, he would bring his teachers and student teachers to help teach, and they would get experience that way. Again, people like Vinnie Ferraro, Dave Smith, who's out in Colorado now, who I've worked with a bunch. Jessica Mori, actually, who's taught at who used to teach at IMCN once in a while. But anyway, another guy was Chris Crotty, who was a local guy, and that's the first time I met him was actually the first time I met him on that retreat is he was the yoga teacher actually, and then he started being part of the teaching team, and he was a local guy. He's from Gloucester, and somebody wanted to start a Boston branch of Against the Stream, and I may say somebody because it was a person with some money that was willing to donate some money. That's often how these things get started. It was somebody with a couple $1,000s that wanted to let's do this in Boston, and Chris was like, Chris was willing to be the teacher, and then he needed help, and he said, who wants to help me start Against the Stream in Boston? I was like, 100% I do, and that was 2014. So we started meeting in Cambridge. We found a little room to rent in Central Square. Advertised on Facebook, and collected donations every week, and to pay for the space and give a little bit of money to Chris, and so that was me running those very simple finances and posting on Facebook about it. And then we eventually got a website, and I would maintain the website. And Chris is great. He's a good teacher. He's a good administrator, and he started bringing in guest teachers. Noah taught there a couple times. We moved to a spot up the road in Harvard Square. The heck was the name of that place? It was a yoga studio. Karma Yoga, I think it was called. Actually, I don't think it's there anymore. But anyway, we were meeting there for a while, and we started doing. Chris started teaching weekend retreats, and then I got into we need a retreat center. Let's find a place to hold a little retreat, and so I got a little more involved in that administrative stuff, and then I would help him out on the retreat, and then ultimately Chris has a teacher in Burma, in Myanmar, by the name of Sayadaw U Indika. Yeah, because so 2016 I think was the first time. Boy, that moved fast. 2016 we brought Sayadaw U Indika over here to teach a week-long retreat. So that was quite an undertaking.
That was at Inside Meditation Center.
Yeah, the first year actually it was at a retreat center in upstate New York called the Watershed Center.
Oh.
But then after that, then he taught. But then Chris worked with Matthew to see if we could do, because there weren't really facilities at IMCN to do residential retreats. When we did do it, there was that offsite building over on.
Yeah. Let me interrupt for 1 second, just for our listeners. The Buddhism is a broad field.
Yeah.
And if I understand right, we're all talking in all this conversation about insight meditation.
Yes.
So if you could just say something about insight meditation
Sure.
as opposed to other Buddhist practices.
Sure. So the way I would summarize it is that there's two main branches of Buddhism: Theravada, which is the Southeast
Yeah.
Asian, Theravada, and Mahayana.
Yes.
So it's like sometimes they call it Northern and Southern Buddhism, but the Theravada countries, the main Theravada countries today are Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and Thailand. A little bit Laos, Southeast Asia. But then Mahayana is everything else, like up into China, and then Tibetan Buddhism, I guess, is sort of a third thing, but it was an early offshoot from Mahayana. But anyway, I think of insight as the Western manifestation of Theravada Buddhism, which uses as its scripture the Pali Canon, which is the earliest written records of the Buddha's teachings.
So, we don't have a lot of time left, and I did want to get to the unfortunate developments that happened with Against the Stream Dharma, where there were allegations of impropriety against Noah Levine. He has said that they're unfounded, but I think the board of directors of Against the Stream stripped him of his authority there, that he was made ineligible to teach at Spirit Rock on a permanent basis.
Yeah.
And so this is something which has happened in a lot of spiritual traditions, religions, and certainly in the sort of Asian teachers coming to the U.S. and getting into trouble at some points, but rather than focus on that kind of bad behavior, more interested in sort of the impact that it had on the community.
Yeah.
and what happened there, because it is something that is really hard to deal with. I mean, and even looking at the Catholic Church and all of the things that happened there, and how heart-wrenching that was for people who really...
Absolutely, yeah. So 2018, I guess these it follows the familiar pattern. Multiple women started coming forward and saying that Noah had behaved inappropriately, with them in some fashion, and there was an investigation, and so just to practically and institutionally, what happened is Against the Stream as an organization sort of broke up in the sense that the leadership team sort of left, and all of those satellite units that I mentioned, like San Francisco and Nashville and Boston, basically they all just rebranded because I could speak to Boston because I was in Boston. We didn't have a direct legal financial connection to Against the Stream LA, so there wasn't any of this legal detangling. We literally just renamed ourselves. We became Boston Meditation Center. That wasn't me that led that change. That was Chris. But all the others did the same thing. ATS Nashville became Wild Heart Meditation Center, which is still functioning. Can't remember what it's called in San Francisco, but Vinny is still leading the group in San Francisco. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that there was a legal fight about the ownership of Against the Stream and the name and everything, and Noah did ultimately retain it and is still teaching today in Los Angeles under the name Against the Stream in a relatively small space in Venice. But it's a shadow of what it once was as an organization. But yeah, just to say, again, because of the type of people that were attracted to Against the Stream, there's a lot of people with a lot of trauma, honestly, in that Sangha, the community. The Buddhist word for community is Sangha. And so, it was, in a lot of ways, the community just dispersed. Like a lot of the people that I used to see on a regular basis, it's not because there's bad feeling. We just kind of like, there's not this central organizing entity and teacher. There's definitely still connections. It's just not what it once was. And I know a lot of people were harmed.
Was there any kind of forums where people could talk about how they were their reactions to
Well,
what was
sure.
happening?
I mean, at Against the Stream Boston, I mean, we definitely had like, one of our Thursday night meditations, like Chris had to come in and sort of announce that, it had been out there that this was happening, but he had to come in and announce that Against the Stream was sort of ending as an organization for all intents and purposes. It was hard. I mean, Noah did, a couple of live streams. Again, as far as what actually happened, of course, I don't pretend to know what actually happened. And nobody knows what happened between Noah and these women. But the salient point is that the Against the Stream, by the time, had a teachers' council. I mean, they said, okay, Noah, you need to step down from your teaching duties for a period of time. I think they laid out requirements, like you need to stop teaching, you need to seek counseling or therapy, and I think they might have asked him to undertake a vow of celibacy for some period of time. And he just said, no, I'm not doing that.
Wow.
And it was anyway. The salient point is, I think, is that Noah demonstrated, many leaders do this. Noah demonstrated an unwillingness to take accountability.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, for you personally, I mean, this is someone who I assume you had a great respect for. I mean, when it came out, I mean,
nobody was surprised.
No, oh, okay.
I mean, it's just, he has a big personality. Noah is an odd, in a way. He is a big personality, and he is a man of large appetites, and he's never hidden that. Noah Levine, I'm not saying anything that he wouldn't own up to. Noah Levine really likes to gamble.
Huh.
He likes playing poker. Which is, again, sort of classically like not a very Buddhist thing to do or whatever. He likes Cuban cigars. You know what I mean? He's just, so again, nobody was surprised, but it's still kind of heartbreaking. Like, damn it, what, really?
Yeah. I mean, was there a feeling of betrayal there?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think the lesson here for people on
We need to be wrapping things up, but go ahead. Make that
on the
lesson.
spiritual path is that it's not about the leader.
Yeah.
It's not about the practice. It's
Yeah.
about your own personal experience and growth.
Yeah.
So
I guess
that's part of the
Yeah.
letting go.
Well, yeah, and we're running out of time. Actually, there's one other thing I wanted to say about my own spiritual journey, because it's like the point of this is that the thing I think that drew me to Buddhism is, again, like, I was never a person. I went down all these different paths, and no one of them turned out to be like the thing, and I always kind of felt bad about that. Like, I never had a coherent career, and I was like, I never really knew who I was supposed to be in the world. And the thing that Buddhism did was show that entire line of inquiry is like a red herring. Like, it doesn't. It's like, you are fine, like, right now.
Yes.
You know, and this whole thing of like who I'm supposed to be is you know, some people seem to know from the beginning who they're supposed to be, and they follow that path and they do it, and it's great. Like, that's awesome for them. But it didn't, you know. So,
Yeah.
But the point is, if you don't have that, like, you're still okay,
Yes.
basically.
Yeah, I sometimes
Well
talk
said.
about letting life come to you.
Yeah.
You know, not trying to control,
Yeah.
well, it should be this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we need to,
Final question.
yeah, but I don't know whether, well, it'll have to be brief.
Sure.
Any final thoughts you have for our audience about how they can lift their spirit.
Oh yeah. Learning to let go. I'll just go with Ajahn Chah, famous Thai
Yes.
Buddhist teacher of the 20th century. He said, if you let go a little, you get a little peace. If you let go a lot, you get a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you get complete peace. And you don't need to worry about that letting go completely, because that's like a big deal, but like any little bit that we can like loosen our grip on our notions of the way things should be and the way we should be is going to help you move in a more positive direction.
Great. That's a wonderful place to end on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
This has
Thank
been really
you.
great.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You want to wrap it up?
No, you can.
Oh. Well, thank you very much for viewing or listening, and we hope you join us again next month.